Have you ever felt like, school taught you a lot about quadratic equations or maybe the history of the Roman Empire, but um, absolute nothing about how to actually manage money?
Oh, definitely. It's something so many people say, isn't it?
Yeah. And today, there's just so much financial advice swirling around. It could feel like a maze trying to figure out what's useful and what's just noise.
It really can be overwhelming. And that's exactly why Robert T. Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, from back in '97, made such a huge splash.
Right. That book is everywhere.
It is. It's personal finance, self-help, but told as a story, kind of life lessons,
Right.
And it just clicked with millions of people.
So that's what we're diving into today. Our mission is to unpack the core ideas from Rich Dad, Poor Dad, look at the insights, why it had such an impact, and yeah, we'll touch on the criticisms too.
Exactly. We're drawing from a detailed review of the book, trying to pull out the key nuggets for you, give you a clear picture of what it teaches and why it still matters.
Okay, let's jump right in. Where do we start?
Well, the heart of it, the absolute core, is this comparison Kiyosaki makes. He contrasts two major father figures from his childhood.
Okay, so the rich dad and the poor dad.
Precisely. On one side, there's poor dad. This was his actual father, highly educated, academic, good, steady job.
Sounds like the traditional path, right?
Totally. But, and this is the kicker, our sources say, despite all that, he always struggled with money, always felt that financial pinch.
Interesting. Okay, so who is rich dad?
Rich Dad was his best friend's father. Less formal education, not that traditional career path at all, but he was a businessman, street smart, and financially very savvy.
Ah, so a totally different background and approach.
Completely different. And this contrast, this clash of philosophies about life and especially about money, that's the engine for the whole book. Kiyosaki says Rich Dad's perspective fundamentally changed his life.
It really sets the stage for everything else he talks about.
It does. It's the foundation for all the lessons that come out of it.
So what's one of the first big lessons then?
A really crucial one is the need for financial education itself. Kiyosaki argues pretty strongly that, formal schooling often just fails us when it comes to practical money management.
Yeah, that definitely resonates. It feels like a huge gap. There's that quote, right? Something like
School teaches us how to earn money, but not how to manage it. Something along those lines, yeah.
that really hits home.
Yeah.
So the book stresses learning about investing, taxes, assets, liabilities,
Yeah.
stuff you just don't typically get in a classroom.
Exactly. It makes you wonder, why don't we learn this? Maybe the system was built for a different time, focused on creating employees, not, financially independent people.
That's a deep question. And it leads right into one of his maybe most talked about ideas, the asset versus liability thing.
Oh, yeah. His definitions are really specific and maybe a bit simplified for, say, accountants, but powerful for the average person.
Right. So an asset is something that puts money into your pocket.
Mm.
The source mentioned things like rental property, shares, business income.
And a liability. That's anything that takes money out of your pocket, like your car payment, loans, credit card debt, even luxury stuff that costs money to maintain.
Okay, into the pocket, out of the pocket. Simple, but profound.
It is. And he has that quote, rich people acquire assets, poor people acquire liabilities thinking they're assets.
Oof. That makes you think. Like your house, right? Most people think it's their biggest asset.
But by his definition, if it's just costing you money every month, mortgage, taxes, repairs, like it's acting like a liability. Unless it's generating income, like a rental.
That's definitely uncomfortable for a lot of people to hear, I bet. But it forces you to reevaluate everything.
It really does. It makes you look at your spending completely differently. Are you buying things that make you money or things that cost you money?
And realizing that difference, that's kind of the key to escaping what he calls the rat race, isn't it?
Exactly. The rat race. That's his term for the cycle most people get stuck in. Working for a salary, paying bills, working for a salary, paying bills. Just this endless treadmill.
Running hard, but not really getting anywhere financially.
Right. You're just covering expenses, maybe saving a tiny bit, but never really building wealth or freedom.
So how do you break out of it, according to the book?
The solution he pushes is creating passive income. Finding ways for money to work for you instead of you always having to work for money.
Ah, the dream. Making money while you sleep.
Pretty much. It connects back to that other quote, poor people work for money, rich people make money work for them.
It's such a fundamental shift in thinking. It's like asking yourself, is my financial life a hamster wheel, or am I building something?
That's a great way to put it. And building something often involves risk, which is another area Kiyosaki tackles.
Right, because investing, starting a business, that feels risky to a lot of people.
It does. But he argues risk isn't necessarily bad. The key is understanding it and managing it, not avoiding it altogether. He says something like, winners aren't afraid of risk. Losers are afraid to take risks.
So it's about calculated risk, not just recklessness.
Hmm.
But how do you learn to calculate that risk, especially if you're starting out? That seems like a big hurdle.
That's a really important question, and it ties into another core principle, learning. He stresses learning from failures, adapting, and this connects to how he thinks you should view your job.
Okay, how so?
He says work to learn, not just to earn.
Ah, I like that. See your job as more than just a paycheck.
Exactly. See it as a place to acquire valuable skills, skills that will help you manage risk, build businesses, invest wisely, things that pay off long term.
That makes so much sense. I know early on I was definitely just focused on the salary. Missed opportunities, probably.
Yeah.
What skills does he highlight?
Our source mentions things like sales, marketing, investing itself, and communication. Think about how powerful those skills are beyond just one specific job. They give you options.
Absolutely. Okay, so those are some key lessons. What about the book itself? What are its main strengths? Why did it resonate so much?
Well, a huge factor is just how accessible it is. The language is simple, relatable. It's great for beginners who feel intimidated by finance jargon.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a textbook.
Not at all. And it's incredibly motivational. People read it and feel fired up to actually do something, to change their financial habits.
That's powerful. It
Yeah.
really shifts your mindset about what's possible, aiming for financial freedom.
Definitely. And the story format, the two dads, the real life examples, it makes it engaging, easier to remember than just dry facts.
Okay, but no book is perfect.
Yeah.
What about the criticisms? We mentioned touching on those.
All right. So while it's great for motivation, a common critique is that it's maybe a bit light on the how. It tells you what to do, buy assets, get financial education, but not always the specific practical steps to get there.
More inspiration than instruction manual, maybe.
Sort of, yeah. It's more about changing your thinking first. Then there's the whole question around the rich dad character.
Yes, was he real?
Our source notes that, yeah, some people doubt if he was one actual person or maybe a composite created to illustrate the points more clearly.
Does it matter, though, for the lessons?
Maybe not for the core message, but it's something people discuss. And finally, some finance pros point out his definitions, like for assets and liabilities.
They're a little loose.
Yeah, simplified compared to strict accounting definitions. They serve his purpose of challenging conventional thinking, but they aren't textbook definitions.
So is that simplification good for the audience, or?
That's the debate. For a beginner, it makes complex ideas easy to grasp. For someone with more financial background, it might feel too simple.
Okay, that makes sense. So who is this book really for, then? Who should pick it up?
Based on our sources, it's really broad, but especially good for people starting out. Students, college kids thinking about their financial future before bad habits set in.
Makes sense. Get him young.
Right. Also, people in regular 9-to-5 jobs who are thinking, okay, how do I build something on the side? How do I create passive income?
Yeah, looking for that escape route from the rat race.
Exactly. And definitely entrepreneurs. Anyone starting a business trying to build wealth. That mindset shift is crucial.
So if we kind of pull back, try to summarize the big takeaway. What's the essence?
I think one of the most powerful lines, summing it up, is it's not how much money you make, it's how much you keep.
That cuts right to it, doesn't it? Earning is only half the battle.
Precisely. So the overall verdict from the review we looked at, it can be genuinely eye-opening, even life-changing for people taking that first step towards financial freedom. It challenges how you think, inspires smarter money moves. It got a solid 4.5 out of 5 stars.
Pretty high praise.
Ah.
So a final thought for our listeners then. As you reflect on Kiyosaki's two dads, his whole philosophy, maybe ask yourself, what small shift in your thinking about assets versus liabilities could, redefine your path towards financial freedom?
Yeah, which dad's philosophy are you following right now, maybe without even realizing it, is time to think differently.